Hi everyone, back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris and Mark back with part 2 of Rate the Squad. That's right, we're moving into the business area of the field, in my opinion, and that is the midfielders. We're going to talk about the players who played in midfield this season for Newcastle United across the course of this difficult season. We're going to rate them out of 10, same rule as we did in the defenders. Rate them out of 10 and then say whether we're going to sell or keep them. So are you ready for this one, Mark? Let's get stuck into the middle.
Yes, get straight into it, mate.
Exactly right. So pull the midfielders up. We're going to get straight into this and rate the lads. So we're going to start, we're going to go left to right. So we're going to start with the beast himself, that is Joe Linton. And before we get into anything about Joe Linton, massive news, Mark, that he signed a new contract this season and is going to extend his stay at Newcastle United. Weirdly enough, the score about the game is probably not indicative of how important he is to this squad, but we've missed him so much this season for huge chunks of the season. So I'm going to start with Joe Linton. Looking at Joe Linton's stats, so he played 20 matches this season in the Premier League and 4 in the Champions League, 2 goals in the Premier League, 1 goal in the Champions League as well. Massively hampered by injuries, which probably affects my score for him, really, because the Joe Linton that we saw was the Joe Linton who was coming back from injury. Then he broke down a few times, Mark, didn't he? Which was difficult to see on the pitch as well. You questioned the recovery and the managing of the players' fitness, but out of 10 this season for Joe Linton, for me, because he's missed huge chunks of it, and it probably shows you how good of a player that he is. I'm going to give Joe Linton a 6.5, but that's mainly because he's missed huge chunks of the season through injury. So what would you give Joe out of 10, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously his stats are down because his playing time is down. What was he in total this season? I mean, he still played
a decent amount of games, 20 Premier League games.
Yeah, 27 games overall, 3 goals, 3 assists in total. I mean, it's a hell of a climb down from last season with the 8 goals that he scored in total. But factor in the amount of time that he's missing for, and you almost want to score him higher because he's such an integral part of that midfield, and it was such a glaringly obvious miss from that midfield trio that he gets a higher score. But I think on balance, he's not quite been the same bullish battering ram that he was at times last season. And although you missed him, even at times when he was there, he wasn't quite as effective. I don't think he was obviously playing his way back into fitness again. Yeah, I think probably 6.5 is probably fair. Maybe he's a little harsh. There were times when he did look really, really good and was probably playing at a higher level. He certainly had some really good games this season. I think particularly good if you go back to the Milan game. I thought he was particularly good in that, although the result didn't come out. I thought Joe Linton, his goal was exceptional. His overall play, I thought, was really, really good. So there are moments that probably puts him a little bit higher, but 6.5, 7 is probably about right, given the fact that we haven't seen enough of him again this season. And again, an awful lot of these players are really restricted because of injuries.
Absolutely, they've been in and then been out. There's only maybe 1 or 2 of them that have probably been in consistently throughout the whole season. But yeah, I mean, we should say I think we're both agreed on the score, 6.5, 100% keep, and it is a keep because he signed a new contract. A fully fit Joe Linton next season, Mark, is integral to Newcastle United progressing from where we finished this season, isn't it? Really, with him in the middle of the park, hopefully alongside Bruno and maybe Tonali, more on him in a second. That has to be what Newcastle United got craving for next season. He's such an influential player, and he was a huge miss this season. And I think him and Pope in particular, the 2 players, it was said this on the defender and goalkeeper video, missing those 2 for huge chunks of this season really derailed us, didn't it, as a team, I think?
Yeah, we talked at length about Pope's being missed and obviously not being reliant on, not being able to kind of trust in Dubravka when he was playing. Almost the same with Joe Linton in that regard, because Joe Linton gives you so much support and so much work rate from midfield to come back and help out, particularly in that left back area. And we saw the difference between Dan Burn at left back with Joe Linton ahead of him and Dan Burn at left back without Joe Linton ahead of him. And it's night and day. And that shouldn't always be Joe Linton's job. He does a magnificent job at doing it, but it shouldn't be the overall part of his role. That he should be able to depend on your left back to be able to manage without him at times. But look, his miss, his absence in that midfield was huge, him being there then frees up Bruno. It frees up Sean to be able to play a little bit more further forward, a little bit more with a little bit more freedom, and allow them to just wander. And you know that the energy of Joe Linton will get back and cover and be able to put in the hard yards. So I mean, he makes a massive difference to the form of Bruno as well, whose form slipped, and we'll come to him in a second.
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree with you anymore, mate. He's brilliant as Joe Linton, and we just need him fit for next season. So what we're going to move on to his Brazilian brother, partner in crime. If anybody hasn't seen it, by the way, these two are having an absolute ball at Joe Linton's wedding on social media. I want to be there. I want to go to a Brazilian wedding. That looks an absolute crack of a time. It really, really does. I just hope that the two of them can get fit for the pre-season, because that looks like some serious bevy is being sunk at that wedding. So congrats to Joe and his missus. And
absolutely, I think Bruno's hangover might last for a couple of weeks. It's that looked some party, so congratulations to him. But that looked a hell of a party.
Oh, mate, absolutely. I mean, we've been to some weddings, but that is a party, damn right. So moving on to the jewel in the crown, really the main man in our midfield. Certainly for me, I think for a lot of people this season in Bruno Guimaraes. I mean, 37 games played in the Premier League, 7 goals, 8 assists, 6 in the Champions League, 1 assist in the Champions League. Arguably one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. He certainly ran the most miles, Danny Murphy, even though he's not athletic. But just an absolute gem of a player. Rightly so, probably caught an interest from some of the big teams in European football. And for me, this is the biggest score I've put out there yet. He's a 9 for me this season, Bruno. I just think he's been absolutely sensational. I can't remember many games where he's disappeared. Most games he's been there, he's ever present. I think that big string of games where he showed the discipline as well not to get the yellow card was a level of maturity that I didn't actually think he had as a player as well, which was astounding for me, with the way that he plays a game on that kind of cusp of madness that all the good midfielders do play the game on. I think back to Roy Keane's and even Gerrard, back in his kind of earlier stages of his career, he was 2-footing people out of nowhere and getting red cards. And Bruno does dance on that line, but for him to be as disciplined as he was, the passion he shows, the quality, he leads this team, Mark. He may not have the armband, but I think he's absolutely sensational. And I pray to God, or any God anyone worships watching this bloody episode, that he does not leave this football club in the summer. I have a bad feeling that somebody may test the water for him, possibly Man City, possibly La Liga. And if he goes, Mark. But I mean, this kid is one of the best midfielders I've ever seen in a black and white shirt, and he's 9 out of 10 for me. What a player, man.
Well, I think that there are a few rumours dotting around that both City and Arsenal, who both would like to test the water, are not willing to go to the 100 million to get him out of Newcastle, and that bodes well. There's only a couple of weeks worth of a window, isn't there, for him, from the window opening to when his window closes at the end of the month. So it looks like that very much he could be staying. I think there was an Instagram post that was put on by a Bruno fan page that was then retweeted by his dad, I think, that would suggest that that indications are that he's setting his stall for 24-25. So yeah, I mean the hope is, I think, for every Newcastle fan, that Bruno is still there, because he's the hub. He's the part of that midfield, is that integral cog that everything runs through. And his stats this season back that up. 10 assists overall this season. That's up from the 5 that he had last season, in the solitary one that he had for the first half of season that he was at the club. His ability with the ball is second to none, really. At Newcastle, he passes all over. His ability to run with the ball as well. I think he's in the top 6 or 7 players with the number of dribbles as well. For a central midfielder that plays mostly at the base of a 3 in midfield, it's a phenomenal stat when he's up there with some of the wide players that he that he's been compared to in that particular stat. But his ability is just unmatched, I think, at the club at the moment. He's certainly I still think he's the one, along with Isak, you can't afford to be without. And he's had a terrific season. There have been a number of games, and I think, as I said before, that Joe Linton being missing hampered him for a good little while, and that did bring his form down a little bit. I'm not quite as generous with my scores. I would give him an 8 out of 10, and I think it just because I've got a couple that are higher, and I think deserve a little bit more praise. And Bruno's been phenomenal for certainly the latter part of the season, and he'd probably have scored a 9 had that been overall. But I think those few games just bring him down a little bit. But he's been terrific, and like I say, just an absolute integral part of that midfield again.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to dig you out for that score, Mark. Your score is your score. But yeah, I mean, he is such an integral member of this team. And you're right. I mean, with Joe being next to him for longer periods of this season, I think he could have possibly scored higher, even for me as well, potentially. Some people watching this, I'm sure. Again, guys, score along, like the video too, and subscribe if you haven't already, because I didn't forget to say that at the start, because I was so keen to get into the middle of the midfield. But yeah, let us know your scores in the comments, guys, as you did in the fandom one. We always like to hear from you. We'll take a time to answer to you as well. If you take the time to comment, we'll take the time to answer. But I think Bruno's only going to get better as well, I think, next season, a few signings around him, maybe some better players to read his kind of ability, his ability to play a ball. There's been so many times where he's had the ball as well, Mark, and he's looked up and maybe Almiron's offside or Barnes hasn't made that run or something like that. I mean, outside of Isak and Gordon, really, there's not many, I would say, make smart runs in the team. So he's probably lacking that in terms of, because he's got that radar to make those passes. Everybody was waxing lyrically about Bruno Fernandes's first time pass to Kobe Mainoo in the FA Cup final, which was a decent ball, but it's because Mainoo makes that run and he can do that. Whereas with Bruno, he's only got 2 players really who are making those runs. Barnes gets in good positions too, but we'll get into Barnes in the attacking episode. He's not been available enough this season. So Barnes hasn't got himself into a good rhythm of fitness and playing week in, week out. So Bruno knows he makes that run. So yeah, for me, I hope we keep him next season, because I think he could be massive for us again next season. But I think it's a no-brainer, this one, Mark. Keep or sell, 100% keep for me.
Keep absolutely. Can I just pick up on something you just said there? And it's not very often I'll give Bruno Fernandes some praise. That pass was exceptional.
It was a great ball. It was a great ball.
Watch him, and Bruno's the same way, where he's constantly scanning where things are on the field.
Because he looks at him twice. He knows he makes that run. Yeah,
he knows. And that's the difference that a player like that and a player like Bruno Guimaraes can make on the football field, because they are already a step ahead of everybody else. And you see the number of times that we see a pass from where he'll play one over the defence before anybody's even set, because he's already seen the run 10 minutes before it's happened. And it's that kind of difference maker that teams need, and he can certainly do that in and around the box. So yeah, I mean, he's an absolute certain to stay for me. I wouldn't let him go anywhere if he didn't have to.
Absolutely, 100%. No, I mean, for me, I'll get into this in the attacking video, but for me, Barnes, next season would be in this pool of players, because I'd like to see him be more of a number 8 Frank Lampard style midfielder, because he has that ability to arrive in the box, and his finishing ability is unbelievable. And I think that Barnes would improve as a player. He'd be more on that in the attacking video, and that would give Bruno again more of a chance to find that pass where he has to pull out wide to get it, maybe knock it to the edge of the box at Barnes arriving. But we'll get into that in the attacking video. We'll get into that. So we're going to move on to the next player, and what a breakthrough season for this young man, Mark. Louis Miley. I'm a huge, huge fan of this player, as anyone who watches the channel regularly knows. I cannot believe some Newcastle content creators have even fathomed the idea of selling this player, or even saying he's not as good as Sean Longstaff. It blows my fucking mind. It really does. Anybody with working eyes who have watched football for a period of time and knows what a decent football player is should see this kid this season. At 17 years old, Mark, to have played the games this lad has played, and to have played the way that he's played. In every single game he played, he seemed to get better and better at something, better passing, better positioning, better tackling. He was starting to nail people just before he got injured. I remember the Ross Barkley tackle he put on in the Luton game to get Barnes the equaliser. He was just starting to really kind of kick in a bit more and evolve as a player. I mean, he's 17 years old, and I think we've said, Mark, we both agree with this. I'll let you talk about Louis in a minute, but the ceiling for this player is fucking massive, man. You look at Phil Foden and what he's done at Man City. I know they're very different players, but there's no reason why Louis Miley can't be Newcastle United's Phil Foden. The kid has so much in the tank. I mean, just looking at some of his stats there. So for 17 years old, he's played 17 Premier League games. He's got 1 goal and 3 assists. He's played 3 Champions League games. At 17, he's played more Champions League football than Sunderland as a club. And he's got 1 assist. I
was waiting for that one.
Exactly. You knew it was coming. He was tackling, killing Mbappe in the Parc de France and everything else. Again, his stats kind of were brought down a little bit due to some bad form from us just before he got injured. But he's in the 96th percentile for assists at 17 years old against the other midfielders across the top 5 European leagues. Progressive passing, 83rd%. His tackle 71st%, even though apparently he doesn't tackle. Blocks 89, clearances 74. This kid, Mark, is absolutely class for me. I can't wait to see a good preseason under his belt and getting back and seeing how he's going to evolve in the next season. Louis Miley, debut season for me, 7.5 out of 10. Just for doing what he did at 17 years of age. We're going to get into Tonali in a minute, but stepping in and filling that hole from a £50 million player that couldn't play the entire season for 17 years old. Take a bow, Louis Miley. I thought he's been absolutely sensational this season, mate.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with any of that. He has been a real highlight of this season, and there was always the abilities there. We wondered whether we'd see him. We wondered whether he would end up going out on loan somewhere. If the Tonali thing doesn't happen, does he stick around the squad? But he's taken the opportunity with both hands, and those little. And we talk about the assists and those couple of little assists that it's that. And again, come back to that conversation we've just had about the 2 Brunos and those little balls that he played, and he has the awareness to play through the back 4 to a striker who's got himself a little bit of space, and it's just phenomenal. You're absolutely right with looking at the other stats. He did start to put himself around a bit. To be in those high percentiles across those defensive stats, particularly, shows what a good all-round midfielder I think he is. I think a little bit more on the ball probably from Miley. We could expect more time on the ball, especially if he's going to play a more central role, which I think possibly. But he looks so comfortable up and around the opposition box and just those gliding movements to make space for himself, as we saw against PSG. He was just able to find those little bits of space and just move around and pull defenders away and create space for others. His awareness at that age is phenomenal. I'd give him an 8 as well, to be honest with you. Just surely for his impact. I think he's been brilliant. And the sky's the limit for the kid. I know people have said that he maybe lacks a little bit of pace, but it's just you can overcome that with thinking and the ability on the ball, and he'll develop much better on the ball with his passing. His awareness of what's around him will grow and grow and grow the more games that he plays. I just think that he's got such a huge future, and not to want to pile too much pressure on the kid, but I genuinely think he could be an absolute superstar for the club.
I do, and I don't think England will be too far off the horizon as well for him in terms of, again, in the Euros, a lot of players aging out, the likes of Henderson, Phillips going backwards in his career, positions like that I think, no disrespect to the likes of Shaw Longstaff, who are hard-working, honest players. Louis Miley has that little bit of stardust in them boots, that little bit of something. And you're right, Mark, everyone's obsessed with pace. You need to have pace. When you've got the brain and the vision and the ability to spot a pass before anybody else on the pitch, you don't need pace. You just need time to shift it, or even time to take that first touch. Even the first touch can be the pass. Look at the assists he set up for Isak. The first assist that he had against Chelsea, Isak turned around straight away and just pointed at him, because they've obviously seen the boy do it week in, week out in training. I'm really, really excited for this player, Mark. People are way too hung up on that the fact that the kid's, not built like a brick shit house. You don't need to be built like a brick shit house. Look at Lionel. Look at Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi was built like a fucking, a intern bricklayer on a building site for 6 or 7 years, and he danced around players for fun. Xavi and Iniesta were, looked like they were carrying Snow White to the fucking evil queen. You know what I mean? They were tiny little guys, and they were fucking superb. Louis Miley's a big, tall, strapping lad. He will grow into his physique, but he has so much in his locker, and I think this kid will be massive for us next season, Mark. And I don't want to say if Bruno goes. I don't want Bruno to go, as I said before there, but I honestly do think if Bruno goes, this kid's ability could soften that blow. I really do believe that, because I think he's that good. Even Bruno said Bruno was nowhere near that player at 17. And for a player as good as Bruno Guimaraes to say that about Louis Miley, I think says how good this kid could be, mate. So yeah, massive season ahead for Louis Miley. Let's hope he stays injury free and works on his game, and hopefully he'll improve on the brilliant stats already from this season. Now, this is the controversial one. Moving next door to Louis Miley is the one and only Sandro Tonali. Now, it's not been a great season for Sandro Tonali. Big suspension, obviously, took him out of football for a whole year practically. But I'm going to dispel this myth about Sandro Tonali right from the jump, Mark. This is a crazy, almost cult. That's right, I said cult-esque thinking about this player. It's that age-old thing that people, when you're missing, people seem to think you're better than you are as a player. I'm not saying Sandro Tonali is a bad player, far from it. He's an excellent player. He was exceptional for AC Milan. I was amazed they sold him. You can make of that what you will. I'm sure the conspiracy theorists are right in the comments right now. But this lad is a great footballer. But before the suspension, we didn't really see that for Newcastle United. There was flashes of it. The Aston Villa game when he was playing with, Bruno and Joe Linton. He looked excellent, but all in all, he played 8 Premier League games, 1 goal, which was that one against Villa, 3 games in the Champions League, no goals, no assists in the Premier League either. Looking at some of his stats, which again, there wasn't many of them, but, I suppose his best stat is progressive passing, 90th percentile, his carries, 82, but his tackling, interception, blocks, clearances, all really poor for a player that we thought was going to be the 6 that would release Bruno. He seemed to be getting in Bruno's way and doing the same thing. He was even dropped for Sean Longstaff, I believe, Mark, wasn't he, before the suspension even kicked in. And Sean actually went on to have some really good games back then. But for me, this is a tricky one because the lad's barely played, but I think he struggled. I'm going to give Sandro a 4 out of 10. And people might go mad in the comments, especially the old Tonaliites going mental about the player. But, the kid has a lot to prove to the fans, to his teammates, to his manager, and to himself next season. It's a massive season for Sandro Tonali. I, for one, hope he grabs it with both hands and kicks the shit out of it and has an amazing season and shows us all the player that we knew we were going to get from AC Milan. Everyone's saying, the betting thing was on his mind and that hampered his performances. And maybe you're right, but we don't know that. But for me, he's got a hell of a lot to prove, Mark. 4 out of 10. What was your score? What was your take on Sandro?
Yeah, look, I think the huge caveat to Tonali is the fact that he's a younger player, never played outside of Italy. He's moved countries, moved clubs. It's brand new surroundings for him. He was thrown in, and I thought the first game of the season, I thought he did pretty well. He was never spectacular, but he was learning the Newcastle way, and it's taken a little bit of time for others to get to that point. You've only got to look at Anthony Gordon. I think he's the prime example of when he came in. Just at times, he didn't look like he was ready. He didn't look like he was up to speed with how things were going. Lewis Hall's probably the example from this season where he's not quite at the races to start with. The more time he spends around the squad, the more time he spends learning about what's wanted from him under Eddie Howe. They've got better. The problem for Tonali was that we didn't get enough of him, and that was taken away because of the ban. And he has to own that. He has to come back, and he's got an awful lot of probably making up to do with a lot of Newcastle fans. Yes, there are those Tonaliites, I think you call them, as you once used to call Joe Cyples for Joe Linton, and you've retracted that one massively.
We know how that one went. Yeah, mate.
Exactly.
If it works the same for Tonali, he'll be all right, mate. He'll be all right.
Well, if lightning can strike twice, he was a very, very good player in Serie A. And I was amazed, as you, that Milan allowed him to go, and maybe there were reasons for that. But we there's definitely a player there, and when he comes back, it will be like having a new signing all over again. I don't think he's particularly shown his full repertoire. I think is probably the best word to use in the few games that we've seen him play. Like I said, he's only played 8 games. He's only played 438 minutes of Premier League football. It's really not enough time to make a judgment on just how he will be in the future. 4's probably fair, just purely and simply because we haven't seen enough of him. There are flashes. There are moments where we've gone, there's the player that you've signed to be the future alongside Bruno, really, or to take over for him, perhaps, if he was to move on. But we just haven't seen enough of him. And I think 4 is fair. I wouldn't go any higher. I wouldn't go any lower. Particularly, I know people will scream that he should be lower because of what he's brought on himself. But purely on football and ability, I think that's the score I would give him too. Like I say, we just haven't seen enough of him yet.
No, I agree. I think, to be honest with you, people will argue the other way. I think they'll argue up because there's just this crazy kind of notion that he's the player that we've missed this season. And, if he had been there, would have been top 4. And I just don't buy into that. I don't buy into that at all. I mean, Joe Linton, yes, because we've seen what Joe Linton's done over years of being here. And Pope as well, I get. And I would give you those 2 players. But a brand new player to the league who didn't show a great deal in the handful of games that he played, couple of flashes of brilliance, as you say, Mark, but not consistent enough. Even if he hadn't had the ban, I wouldn't have been saying, he's even a shoo-in for the starting 11 the way he was playing that particular time. So this crazy notion of Sandro being, the white knight, just like the sun hitting my face on this video, as you can see, which I've tried every angle to move around here, every formation imaginable, and this is the best I'm going to get. But yeah, I think it's a big season for Sandro next season. I really hope he repays the faith that the club and Eddie Howe have shown in him, and he really knuckles down and he really puts in. And you're right, Mark, if Bruno goes, Sandro might need to step into that main kind of captain fantastic midfield berth and grab games by the nuts and do it, and he's capable of it. We've seen him do it for AC Milan. So, let's just wait and see what happens next season. But a massive season for Sandro Tonali, no doubt. So moving on to the bottom row there, Elliot Anderson. Again, a very good season for Elliot. With every season, we say the same thing about Elliot, don't we, in pre-season. This is his year. This is his year. And every single year, it seems to have been something's gone wrong, an injury here, an injury there. And this season's no different. He has had some injuries, but he has really evolved, I think, as a player this season, Mark. That Elliot Anderson's come through the ranks, obviously, as an attacking midfielder. He can play a multitude of positions. He spends most of his time either in a 10 or out wide or as attacking midfielder. But we've seen him fill in to that defensive capability this season, and he's really kicked on. He's only 21 years of age. So again, like Miley, he's evolving as a player, but 21 Premier League games played, 2 assists, 2 Champions League games played. In terms of his statistics, again, going into his defensive capabilities, clearances, blocks, aerials, he's in the kind of mid 80s to mid 90s. Progressive carries is a big thing. 97 percentile, successful take-ons 98, progressive passes 96 percentile, his assists 92nd percentile. So for a young player coming through, that's what you want. You want to see progression, and I think Elliot is, he's filled out physically. He's got that strength, that physicality of his game now. He's flying into tackles and squaring up with, proper seasoned veterans of Premier League football, not giving a shit who they are. And it's brilliant to see. And I think I'm going to give Anderson, it's a tough one. Because I gave Louis a 7.5 because of the assists mainly. But I'm probably going to give Anderson a 7, I think, just because Miley gets the half because of the assists, I think, and the goal. And maybe his age as well, possibly. But I'm kind of dancing between 7 and 7.5. Go on, I'll be generous. 7.5 for Anderson. Go on, I would say 7.5 as well. I can't be unfair to both the lads, but I think he's been sensational as well since he's come back from this really bad back injury that kept him out for a long time, Mark. And when he gets that first goal, I just think he's going to go on a little run as well and get goals. But before you get into the score as well, where do you see Elliot playing? Is he now a central midfielder? or is he so versatile he can do different jobs?
I think what we've seen he's a very good ready-made replacement for Joe Linton. Now that he's fit, and you touched on the injury. I mean, to miss 25 games this season through injury is horrible. And we've said, I think if you probably go back to our pre-season stuff for the last 2 seasons, we've both gone, Elliot Anderson's going to be the one that stands out. He's going to be the one. And we've watched him in pre-season and gone, this is the year. This is the year that he's going to stand up. And it's just not happened for him. And then this season, again, in pre-season, we sat there and thought, yeah, this is going to be it. And then the injury happens. You're like, oh, for fuck's sake, honestly, when is he going to get his break? And it came on the back of obviously him getting fit, but Joe Linton being out, and I think he's taken to that role really, really well. His aggression in midfield, his ability, he's got good ability on the ball, but his ability to get stuck in and play that beast role in that midfield three, where he's the one that almost the marshal that's going to run around and get stuck in and put players off by being that aggressive nuisance in midfield. He's taken to that really well. And I do think that's probably his future. I think that he can do that job really, really well and fill in for Joe Linton where needed. But he's got that versatility to be able to play further forward and maybe even be, what we saw the season before with Willick and Joe Linton being a good combo on that left-hand side, to do the same thing with him and Joe Linton at times and in certain game scenarios where maybe Gordon plays a different position or Barnes is playing a different position or they're rested, and you've got the ability to move these players around now. That once they're both all fit, I think those players just give you huge options, particularly on that left-hand side. I think I'd give him a 7. I think his performance over the last few weeks, there were a couple of games where he was a little bit off the pace, but he was still finding his feet back from his injury. But he's been brilliant. And I've never wanted a player to get their first goal more, I think, because he's been so unlucky at times. And you just think that one will bring a huge amount of confidence for him to go on and get more. And he's definitely got the ability to do it.
Absolutely, and he just needs to stay fit. I think it's the thing; these little niggly injuries just need to go. I mean, it could be a part of him growing as well, potentially. I don't know, but he really has come on as a player. He looks mature. He looks ready, to be in around the first team pitch. And you're right, Mark, that to have him and Louis Miley in and around the squad, even if they are understudies for Bruno and Joe Linton, it's great to have them there anyway. You know what I mean? Because it not only is it good to see young academy Geordie players coming through as well. They're going to learn so much off these two other guys and be better players for it. So, and you can see that already in the game and the way they're improving. That the younger players we have now look better because they're playing with better players. If you think back to the younger players we had previously who were playing with absolute turd, they weren't coming on as players and progressing as players because they were training and probably better than the guys they were training with. You know what I mean? So they weren't learning anything from the experienced pros. So yeah, really exciting to see how Anderson progresses, just like Louis, and hopefully good pre-season and a good season for him. I don't think he's going to get called up to the Scotland squad. I don't actually know when that's announced. Has that been announced yet, the Scotland squad?
I haven't seen it yet. I don't think it has just yet.
That would be interesting because he did get called up for the last squad. He pulled out because he was waiting for England. So I just wonder whether the chance of playing the major tournament might just tempt him a little bit, possibly. If we see him in the Euros, he could even progress more as a player, which would be absolutely brilliant. But yeah, well done, Elliot Anderson. Good season. Just need you to be a bit more fit next season, mate. So here's another controversial one we're moving on to next. Now, this is a player that divides opinion. I always caveat it by saying he's such a lovely lad. He really, really is. Every time you see him getting interviewed and I've seen him, I live in the community near him and I see him going around and he talks to the kids at the primary school. And he's just a lovely kid in general. He's a great role model for the football club and the academy as well. He's had a really tough season, has shown it. But saying that, caveating that, 35 Premier League games, Mark, 6 goals, 2 assists, 5 Champions League games, 1 goal. I mean, you say them stats out loud and you go, it's not bad that actually, for a midfielder. And I think the problem Sean's had this season, very similar to Dan Burn, is when you lose the drive and the energy and the relentless work rate of players like Joe Linton and Joe Willick, the spotlight kind of falls on you as a player, and your limitations then get kind of accentuated for everybody to see, what you're not good at, because the guy who's really good at that isn't there anymore. So people go, oh, you can't do that. And then people start to judge, you maybe a little bit unfairly at times as a player. And I'm not going to throw the scapegoat thing, because I don't like that bullshit. I really don't. If a player has a bad game, he has a bad game, and you're able to say it. You're not making somebody a scapegoat. You're just pointing out the fact that he didn't have a very good game. So although Sean has scored a lot of goals, and I think earlier on in the season when he did take Sandro Tonali's place in the team, he was on a real rich vein of form. He's had injuries. He's been struggling with ankle injuries. So I think that's hampered his game, because we always say Sean Longstaff just runs all day. I call him Sean Longstaff, don't I? Because he just runs non-stop. And this ankle injury has definitely hampered that part of Sean's game this year, no doubt about it. The keep or sell is going to be a really interesting one in the minute, Mark. But the score for me out of 10 for Sean Longstaff, I'm going to have to give him a 6.5, because although he's scored a decent amount of goals and he's got some assists, he's gone missing in way too many games. I think, in terms of his ability on the ball, has been pretty poor. His kind of ability to track runners from midfield, I think, has been quite poor. But again, I think that is caveated by the fact that these big key players who were really good at that were missing as well. But I'm going to give Sean 6.5, and I'm going to sit and think for a minute whether I'll keep or sell, mate. But on to you for your score. What would you give Sean, and what was your take on Sean's season?
Yeah, it's weird because last season, when you were talking about Tonali before, and the missing him because of what he could be, or what you perceive him to be, you kind of throw in with Sean as well, because when he's been missing, there's an awful lot of clamour for the fact that he's not there, and I think there was that last season where Sean didn't play and suddenly Newcastle's midfield fell apart.
Yeah.
And his work rate is probably unmatched. He covers an awful lot of ground, and he does put in the hard yards. And an awful lot of what he does is not statable, if that's a word, because his movement isn't always on the ball. It's not always to be creative and things. But I want, from a central midfielder, I want more of that. I want more assists. I want more chances created from him. Across, what is it, 35 games or something this season, he's only created 5 big chances. And that, for a forward, one of the forward-thinking midfield players, I want more than that. And his finishing, although he scored goals, his finishing at times has been dreadful.
He should have 10 goals, really, the amount of chances that he's had.
He should have more. Look, we've talked about him a lot, in that he doesn't seem to set himself right at times when he's getting into shooting positions. He's leaning back. He's not got himself over the ball, so the ball gets skied, and then he'll go through a run where he'll score a couple, and he gets properly into position, and he'll put the ball away, but he does frustrate massively. And you're right, it's difficult because he's a local lad, because of the amount of sort of passion he has for playing for his hometown club. You want him to succeed massively. I just don't think that the ability is there for the next level. I think Sean has been perfect for that building part of this journey, in the surviving the relegation and then the run last season. I think that was the perfect scenario for him. I think he's been found wanting at times this season, and there have been games when he has gone missing and he's just not on the ball, and he gives the ball away too frequently at times. But there's the will there, and he still gets himself into those goal scoring positions, and you admire the fact that he still continues and gets into those positions. But it's a difficult one, and I would give him I think I would give him a 6.5. I think the goals maybe sway you a little bit higher, but
yeah,
his overall play, I think, I want more, and I'm greedy. But for my midfield players, I want more on the ball. I want him to be able to keep the ball better and pass the ball better, and be more creative, especially if you're playing in and around the box. I love those little runs he makes in behind the fullback and gets played in by Trippier or Livramento. Those are great. It's then the next part. He has to do better once he gets there. So yeah, 6.5 for me. To sell or to not to sell?
That's a big question. Just hang on a second, just before you think about that. So if the FFP and PSR situation is there, which it might be in the background, you got to think about players you can sell that you can bring money back in. Obviously, with Sean being an academy, product, he's 100% profit in terms of what you sell him for. Now, that's one thing considered. The other thing considered, Mark, we've just talked and waxed lyrically about Louis Miley and Elliot Anderson, who have both scored higher than Sean Longstaff. Have those two young lads gone ahead of Sean in the midfield pecking order? And if they have, does that mean that he could be sold? Whether he will be sold is different, but would you sell him or would you keep him if you were in charge?
The question I've got in my head is, would I sell the other 5 that we've gone through? And the answer is no.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you.
And that leans towards, if you need to raise funds, there are probably 2 players then that leaves you with the ability to make decent money out of, and that's not Callum Wilson. And Sean is one of them. And it's maybe it's unfortunate that he's just, there are those players ahead of him. I think he sits behind Tonali now, and I think he probably then, if you're looking at that and you say, well, Tonali's going to play the right-hand side of the 3 with Joe Linton and Bruno, then Miley sits behind in that regard. Anderson, the other side. What that doesn't do is that leaves you with one player to cover Bruno. But I think both Miley and Tonali can both do that. And then we've got the next lad to come in as well from back off the injury table, because we've missed seeing Joe Willick all season too. And I think Sean's one is definitely a sellable asset, and I think he's one that you make some money out of, and the ability to then grow the squad elsewhere. And I think he's probably the victim of that, but I think he's probably the right player of those 5 or 6 to go.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think Eddie will sell him. I think Eddie likes him. I think Eddie trusts him. And as long as Eddie Howe's here, I don't think you will sell him. So I think Sean Longstaff will be part of our squad next season. Now, whatever that means for a Louis Miley or an Elliot Anderson, I can't see him loaning either one of those guys out. Maybe Miley at a push, depending on if we bring any more midfielders in. I don't know. Maybe you'll see that as part of Louis' progression. But I think Louis showed so much quality in the Premier League and the Champions League last season. I don't see why you would loan him out, because it's better to have him in the squad than not have him in the squad. But yeah, I mean, I would probably, if capital had to be raised, I would probably sell Sean, as much as I think he's a great ambassador and all that, a lovely lad. He works hard for the team. I just think that those young lads alongside him now, and I think he even said in an interview, and again, that's how humble the lad is. That's part of the likability of the kid, is he's just such a lovely lad. And he even said that it's a shame Louis Miley's in his position because he's better than he is. And he kind of said it in a nice, humble way. But Sean's not daft. Sean will be seeing that kid in training at 17, as the rest of them will, going, fucking hell, look at this kid at 17. Yeah. But it's took me, this long to get here. And this kid's doing better stuff than I'm doing now. So, and that's what happens. We've seen it before, with obviously players like, Wayne Rooney's and Gerrard's and, Lampard's and those kind of players that come through, and age is nothing. If you've got the ability, you end up jumping ahead of more seasoned pros. And that could be the case for Sean this summer. But it'd be really interesting to see. As I said, I don't think Eddie will sell him, but it might be out of Eddie's hands. You don't know. So we'll have to wait and see how the transfer window progresses there. But moving on to the last 2, I say last 2, probably 1.5 really, because I don't count the last one as even a full player. But Joe Willick. So I love Joe Willick. You love Joe Willick. We all love Joe Willick. But Joe Willick has had a horrific season with injuries, almost like he's been cursed by somebody somewhere down the line. So 9 matches played in the Premier League, 1 goal, 2 Champions League games, no goals. Did score in the cup as well, didn't you, I think, against Manchester United? An absolute raker as well. Stats, funny enough, look quite good despite him being injured, especially what we know Joe Willick is good at is progressive carries is in the 97th percentile, take-ons 84th, touches 97, progressive passes 94, tackles 80%, our blocks 70, so everything that Joe Willick is, the 9 games he played, he showed bits of it, but the injuries hampered him so bad, Mark. He had so many setbacks, and then he would have one really good game and then disappear, for 2 or 3. And he was a shadow of the player that he is, at Newcastle, or has been at Newcastle, due to these injuries. And again, that was another one, a bit like this Sven Botman one, is how the hell did Willick, this lad, get as injured as he did? He's only 24 years old, Joe Willick. So weird enough, another sellable asset, but we'll get into that in a minute. But I'm a massive fan of this player. He's been brilliant since he's been at this football club. And Eddie Howe's made him a better all-around player. But again, next season's a huge season for Joe Willick. If it's another season full of niggles and knocks, he might find his way out of Newcastle United potentially at the end of next season, Mark. But to score Joe Willick, I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10 because I think it's only fair with the lack of games that he's played. He showed glimpses of what Joe can do. But yeah, 4 out of 10 for me. What's your take on Willick?
Yeah, it is really frustrating. I mean, if you go the last 2 seasons, he's missed 41 games over 2 seasons. I think it is. So it's such a huge number of games missed. It's almost unfathomable, if I can say that better than the Megamind did in the movie. It's so frustrating because the kid has such ability. We've seen what he can do in front of goal. We saw it when he came up here on loan. He's never really been able to recreate that sort of form since his permanent move. He scored, 6 Premier League goals in the last 3 seasons, as opposed to the 8 that he got in 14 games the first season he was at the club. But he has matured. He has become a better overall midfielder. He's become a better player, I think, over that time. But we just haven't seen him. I think his total number of minutes this season is 705. He's got 2 goals in total in that, which, to be fair, isn't a bad return. If you look at the number of minutes played per goal, it's not bad at all. Maybe we would have seen more goals out of him this season had he stayed fit. I think you're right. I think 3 or 4 for him this season, just purely based on the fact that we've just seen nothing of him because he's missed so much time through injury. And again, yeah, he is a sellable asset, and I think he's probably got a season left to kind of prove himself now and to get back to the Joe Willick that we've seen. Because if he continues to have the same sort of problems that he's had over the last 12 to 18 months, then I think his name could be one to be on the way out next season.
No, I'd agree with that. I mean, looking at those players before we get into Old Father Time at the bottom right-hand corner here. Sorry, Matt Ritchie. But looking at the other players that we're talking about here, so where do we rank these players in terms of if they all stay next season? And to be honest with you, fully fit and on form, that is a good midfield glut of players there who all have their own abilities and qualities to bring to a squad. So who is the kind of, how are you ranking? So if we're going to go for the midfield 3, who's your starting 3? And then who's the kind of 3 under? I'll give you mine, so I'll give you time to think if you want. So
I've got mine.
Think, yeah, you got yours. So for me, it's probably the same as me. It's Joe Linton, Bruno, and Tonali is probably the 3. And then on the back of that, in order, in terms of players filling in, behind that, I'm going to go, if they're fit and firing, Joe Willick's probably the 4th choice. Then I think, then I think it's a toss-up between Miley or Anderson to me. I'd probably say Anderson, then Miley, then Longstaff as the kind of the last of that list in terms of those midfielders. How does your list sit next to mine?
Yeah, I sort of completely agree with that, to be fair. I think Joe Linton, Bruno and Tonali are the starters. I think Anderson gives you backup for Joe Linton. I think Miley gives you backup for either Bruno or Tonali, and Willick does the same with either sort of Tonali or Joe Linton in that regard as to where you play them. Willick gives you the flexibility to be able to play him further forward, as does Anderson as well. So there's ways that they fill in elsewhere. bottom of that list for me is then Sean. Because he has one position. He doesn't give you really any flexibility. He's not going to play the hub of that midfield. He's not going to play the Bruno role. He doesn't have the ability on the ball. And I think the others are just ahead of him in terms of where they are in their progression and what they can offer. So yeah, that's where I would sit them.
Yeah. And do you think we need another midfielder when you're looking at those players? Ritchie aside, which we'll score in a minute, which won't take long. Do we need another centre midfielder? I know there's been a lot of talk about 6. None of them are a natural 6, that's for sure. Tonali was meant to be a player that could do that, but he doesn't look like he can unless he's learned how to do that. But he's been off for such a long period of time.
He's played that double pivot before, and he did it well for Milan. If you go back to his last season in Milan, he played in that sort of double pivot in midfield. So he's got the ability to do that, definitely. He's not a Declan Rice. He's not a holding midfielder. But he's definitely got the ability on the ball and that quarterback role, almost Carrick-esque, almost. I think where he can dictate play. Although Carrick was good in terms of his defensiveness, but he played that little hub very well, where he could dictate what was going around him. So I think Tonali can do that. I know we've kind of called for a 6 for an awful long time, haven't we? Because I think that's something that in certain games could be a huge plus. You to play a proper defensive midfielder in front of that back four, and for me then it frees up Bruno. There are more needs at the moment. I think there are bigger holes to fill in the squad than another midfielder. I think the midfield that's there, if they're fit, and that's huge, is good enough, and we've seen that they're good enough. I think at 6 or a defensive midfielder is on the wish list. Certainly, from where I look at that squad, I think yes. I think I'd like a proper defensive midfielder that can come in and fill that little gap in the base of the midfield and to give the defence cover, and especially when you've got progressive centre backs like Cher and Botman who like to carry the ball and like to play the ball forward. I want somebody to be able to drop into that position and give them cover. I just don't think it's a huge need, but it's definitely one that I would looking at it, I would want to bring in if I was managing the squad.
Absolutely. I mean, again, looking at that, the next player we're going to score is probably the one that goes from that list. And I think if you can pick up a free transfer, like an Ndidi from Leicester, for example, who can play as a 6, he could come in and take Ritchie's spot in the squad, and then you've got that 6 in the balance of those other midfielders that, can do something a bit different. So I think that could possibly be something that happens. Now there's no European football, as there wasn't when we did the first defender video and goalkeeper video. You can tell we're a bit more upbeat in that one. But yeah, so no European football could be a good thing. Could spell the end of Matt Ritchie at Newcastle United. Now, Matt Ritchie has been great for Newcastle United over the years. He's been here. He was excellent in the Championship. He got us up. He was good in the Premier League. He filled in at left back as well under Rafa, and good left peg on him, could cross a ball well, good from set pieces. But he's so old. He's so old and so slow now that he comes on. It's almost like a fucking soccer aid game when he comes on. He's 34 years old, and I just look at the pace of him, and I just think, what the fuck are you still doing? Never mind, in a match day squad, even in the squad in general, even if he wasn't playing, I'd still be wondering what the fuck he was doing in the squad. But when I see him coming on, when he was coming on ahead of Lewis Hall earlier in the season, honestly, I was pulling what little hair I have left out of my head, thinking, what the fuck is this guy still doing in the squad? I know he's a big character, and I know we've spoke very highly of him, about especially what he did with Sean off the pitch. And that was exemplary, and you've got to give Matt Ritchie credit for that as well, being a seasoned pro. He's the kind of guy that all of the players look up to. He's maybe that conduit between Eddie and the players. If that's the case, make him a coach and get him off the player roster, because he's not offering anything as a player anymore. I mean, looking at his stats, I mean, he's played 13 matches this season, a grand total of 128 minutes. He did get 1 goal. So for me, he's getting 1 out of 10 just because he got 1 goal. And he just offers nothing to the squad. If you want him around the squad, like I say, Eddie, make him a coach. Put him in your coaching setup, and he can be a coach. But he should not be in a match day squad ever again for Newcastle United. He's done. He's done his time. Thank you, Matt Ritchie. You'll never have to buy a pint in Newcastle. Everybody loves you for what you've done previously, but you've done your job. Time to go as a player. So 100% get rid for me, Mark. Sell, retire, do something. Just don't have him as in the match day squad next season.
Yeah, I think he definitely won where the contract's up, let him go. I'd maybe have given him a 1 had he not had that horrendous back pass against, was it Burnley, that caused the corner, which led to the goal. And I think he gets that 1 taken away from him. Little bit like Matt Target, and funnily enough, it's another Matt. There's just not enough.
God damn those Matts! God damn those Matts!
There's just not enough game time for him. I can't give him a score. There's just not any football to be able to kind of give him any sort of grade. You know that things are. The game time is limited when FB ref particularly don't do any sort of scouting on him. They don't give any of this because there's just not enough football been played. And
done nothing.
When you look at his last 2 years of use at Newcastle, 128 minutes of Premier League football this season, 39 last season. That tells you the story, and I think that's probably 128 minutes too much this season, and been a product of the fact that there've been so many injuries. And it's probably been useful that he's been around for that, but the time has come and gone for Matt Ritchie. He's got a new career, hasn't he, to go on to be the bus driver, I think. So that's the that's the way that he should go. So yeah, nothing from me, and definitely one to go out the doors.
Get rid, absolutely. You can still be the table football champion, Matt Ritchie of Newcastle United. You don't have to be a player to achieve that duty. But I think as a coach, he could offer something as a coach. There's no doubt about that, and he could do a bit of time. Newcastle maybe go off and manage a team. He's got a very manager look about him. He looks angry all the time anyway. Even when he was on the Australian trip, they picked him and Paul Dummett, who were the two most miserable looking fuckers you've ever seen in your life, going to meet these Australian fans. So I'm not sure why they didn't send somebody with a bit more crack and smile about them. But never mind. That was the club's choice. That whole trip didn't particularly go down very well anyway. But that's us done for Rate the Squad Midfielders. Really enjoyed that, mate, especially as we broadcasted live from the surface of the sun. So apologies to anybody who has had a headache watching us do this. I would suggest you wear shades if you watch it on the replay. I can't do anything about this unless I move my house, which I really can't do. So thank you so much, everybody who's watched. If this is the kind of thing you like, smash subscribe. Help get us that 8,000 sub mark. We'd love to get there, hopefully before the season kicks off. Like the video, help the channel grow. It's a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.
There we go. I haven't done that in a while. Yeah, you did well there. You did well there. But we're going to be back with the final Rate the Players, Rate the Squad of the Attackers. So that should be really interesting. Stay tuned for that, guys. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Have a cracking one, and we'll see you later. Cheers.
Take care, guys. See you.